into the code. I wanted to understand what was going on. And, me and my brother had been very curious about all sorts of things growing up, buying old televisions, taking them apart, buying old radios, creating dashboards like Star Trek, pretending we were flying spaceships. And so, with Mr. Cooper, I had this really great opportunity to explore computing at a time when most people weren't really doing it, all because he let us loose on it. And that was the start of my IT career when I was about probably 11 or 12 years old.
Mm-hmm. But yet you still didn't just go out like the other kids can. You didn't just go to play. You wanted to go break it apart, figure out how it works. And I find myself always stunned and amazed at just the beauty of the unique human spirit that emerges from each of us. Clearly, there's something in you that was calling for that, even though you weren't necessarily looking for a career in technology. When you got confronted with it, you clearly opted into it in a way that most of the other kids didn't.
Yeah, I think throughout life I question everything. So I'm like that annoying child that's grown up into an annoying adult, and I never take anything for granted. I never take anything on face value. I always want to dive deeper and understand. And I think with the computer, there was this box that did things that just mesmerized me. I just couldn't understand how it did it. It was incredible. And later on, as National Geographic picked up on my work, and all the kind of sense of exploring, live curious, which was their slogan for a while, I think that absolutely typified me. So I just instinctively wanted to know how things worked. I instinctively wanted to know why. And so, when I had this opportunity to do it on these computers, it was just, it opened up this whole new world. And I just seemed to be naturally good at it. I didn't read any books. I wasn't given any instruction. I just sat there for my hour and I just figured it out. And that's been the central sort of pillar of my whole career ever since.
Mm-hmm. Brilliant. It's brilliant. Well, and then keeping along this whole journey of how you were reaching for something else in the world. You're here. You are a very sympathetic, sensitive, empathetic young person. And you said that one of the other things that really had an impact on you was the Live Aid concert. I think that was 85, wasn't it? Or was it 83?
Oh, yes.
85. I don't remember that, but I did get present to it when I watched Bohemian Rhapsody. And that was twice. I love that movie. So why was Live Aid so big for you?
Well, I had heard about, obviously, Do They Know It's Christmas was the big Christmas single by Band Aid, and that came out the previous Christmas or later the previous year. And so that sort of thrust the Ethiopian famine onto our TV screens. Nobody knew about it. The Ethiopian government had done a very good job of basically hiding it from everybody. And the BBC reporter stumbled into this biblical famine. The single came out, there was suddenly all this press, sitting at home, relatively comfortably in Jersey, suddenly seeing this whole new world of poverty, suffering, children starving. It was, for somebody who got upset very easily and for somebody who's always overthinking things, it was a real shot to my senses. And so when the Live Aid came out 6 or 7 months later, it was an extension of the Christmas single. And I just saw more of it. And I just wanted to understand, just like the Commodore PET, why is Ethiopia like that? Why are so many people suffering? Why are we so well off when they're not so well off? Why is there this imbalance? Who isn't fixing it? These kinds of questions. So it gave me that avenue that you quoted earlier, and I needed something that I could focus on, that I could perhaps have an impact on, that was upsetting me, rather than just getting upset for no reason. And Live Aid really focused me on that.
Fascinating, absolutely fascinating. And your story is so compelling. And what's interesting is you and I are about the same age, Ken, and you and I hit some similar kinds of places along our lives where we had similar questions. So I'm very fascinated with your journey. And I think many of their listeners and viewers will find themselves in it as well. So somewhere in there, so let's see. So you must have been starting working sometime in 86 or something like that, or maybe before?
Around then, properly working around that sort of time, yeah.
And you had a job in technology, was that right? I can't remember exactly from your book.
Well, I did paper rounds and earned money writing programs for Mr. Cooper. So I had side jobs when I was very young. That was my early entrepreneurial flair. I fell into finance when I left school. Everybody fell into finance.
Yeah. That's right. Well, so what I also think is interesting is somewhere in there you had, if I recall it right, in your first couple of jobs in finance, you still had this sort of niggling feeling like, but is this really where I want to be? Is this really going to be enough for me? Or is this all I can do, or something along those lines? There were some questions about, is this where I want the game to end?
Yeah. Well, back then there were still jobs for life and finance was booming, and almost everybody I was working with took great comfort in knowing their retirement date and their pension. I used to clock watch. I never used to walk in the office until bang on 9 o'clock. I used to leave bang on 1 for lunch, and I'd hang around outside till 2. I absolutely did not like what I was doing, but there was nothing else I could really do at that time. And so, the questions I was asking myself was, oh my goodness, is this what working life is like? Is this what a job is like, where you live to earn the money and then the money is spent on making your life happy, but every minute you're at work, you're miserable? And I just couldn't face that. I just couldn't face that. And it freaked me out thinking that might be what working life was like. It really did.
I can appreciate that on so many levels. And so then all the more interesting and compelling that you found your way to Zambia in 1993, and that whetted your appetite for, I believe, your international development work. Was that your first international trip?
That was my first trip, yeah, absolutely.
Okay. And so tell us, for listeners, how did that come about?
So I was due to meet a girlfriend in a pub at a certain time for lunch. I got to the wrong pub at the wrong time. There were no mobile phones to correct the situation. I heard a thing on the radio about a tourist train that was going to go and dominate the cycle track that I went to work on. It really annoyed me that a train was going on my cycle track. I bought the paper to write a letter of complaint, saw an ad for this trip to Zambia that summer, and I'd continually had Live Aid on my mind. Even for those 8 years, I was continually looking for outlets and avenues for my passion to do some good. And suddenly this Zambia trip fell on my lap, but only because I was in the wrong pub at the wrong time, listening to a story on the radio that drove me to action. It was so serendipitous. It was crazy. It was meant to be, I think. I really do.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. That goes back again to those chance moments that you talk about in your book and we talked about before we came on air. And remind us, when you did go to Zambia, what were you doing again?
So we were helping to build teaching accommodation for local schools. Most teachers would leave Zambia when they were trained up because the money was better elsewhere. So giving teachers places to live was an incentive for them to stay. So we were working on a project to build school accommodation. And
was that a paid job or a volunteer job?
It was a volunteer job. It was 5 weeks. I paid a bit of money. The states of Jersey government subsidized it quite heavily. But, going from Jersey to rural Zambia, my goodness, what a shock. Suddenly I was seeing a world I'd never seen before.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I appreciate that. I'm from Oregon originally, small town, and then got the chance to live in Spain and Brazil in my mid-20s, went all over Western Europe and South America, had my mind blown wide open. So that's not rural Zambia, but definitely a mind-blowing experience. So want to hear more about what happened from there, but let's first grab our first break. I'm Alise Cortez, your host. We've been there with Ken Banks. He's head of social purpose at Yodi. We've been talking about his earlier life and his yearning for meaning and purpose. After the break, we're going to hear more about what I like to call his wild life scratching. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Dr. Alise Cortez is a management consultant specializing in meaning and purpose, an inspirational speaker and author. She helps companies visioneer for greater purpose among stakeholders and develop purpose-inspired leadership and meaning-infused cultures that elevate fulfillment, performance, and commitment within the workforce. To learn more or to invite Alise to speak to your organization, please visit her at alisecortez.com. Let's talk about how to get your employees working on purpose. This is Working on Purpose with Dr. Alise Cortez. To reach our program today or to open a conversation with Alise, send an email to Alise, A-L-I-S-E, at alisecortez.com. Now, back to Working on Purpose.
Thanks for staying with us and welcome back to Working on Purpose. As I've watched the pandemic continue to go on, we look for ways to help companies support their employees to handle the anxiety, stress, depression, and feeling disconnected while also helping to lift and inspire them with ongoing professional development. So we now offer a learning webinar series called Grab Your Gusto, Vital Wellbeing from the Inside Out. You can learn more about it at alisecortez.com or shoot me an email to alise@alisecortez.com. If you're just joining the program, my guest today is Ken Banks. He's the head of social purpose at Yodi. He's also a British award-winning social entrepreneur, mobile technology and global development expert, and has an undergraduate major in social anthropology with developmental studies. He's the author of 3 books, the latest of which is The Pursuit of Purpose, part memoir, part study, a book about finding your way in the world. He joins us today from Cambridge, England. I'm your host, Dr. Alise Cortez. So for this next segment here, Ken, what I want to do is delve into some of those amazing, I don't even potpourri of experiences that you had in your life, right? That really, I would call it a tremendous stirring machine, right? In fact, I want you to know something. I was out running yesterday and running 12 miles. And as I was thinking about this, and I was thinking, there's a direct proportion to the discomfort, as you call it, that you need in life. I call it agitation, those moments that kind of shake us up or cause us to get out of our own discomfort, that the size of which is directly proportionate to our growth and change. That's how I tend to think of it. I thank you for that, because you gave me that sort of nuanced idea on my run yesterday. But I was thinking about all these things that you went through and did as you went along from this whole path here. And first, I want to talk about the fact that I think it was twice that you literally sold everything that you had, packed up, and left the country you were living in. Is that right? Twice?
Yes, it is. Yes.
Okay. Tell the ages and the circumstances again, real quick.
First one was 30 when I went to university. And then the second one was about 34 when I left Finland and came back to the UK. Interesting.
Yes. Similar kinds of times in my life that I did similar kinds of things. Fascinating. But I didn't sell everything that I had and then uproot and go. So now somewhere in there, you had this crazy idea to start to create your own website, Kawanja, and that was in 2001. And you say it was to socialize your interest and was a desperate cry for help. So what was that all about?
So that very first website was called Alise Hill. Kawanja came a little bit later. And what I did when I was at that point in Finland, where I had once again, I had set out on this journey to try and find meaning, purpose, something to do with my life, which once again had ended in failure. And it was becoming a real habit, just going out looking for things. I wasn't sure what I was even looking for, so I wouldn't even know what success looked like. But before I left Finland, I just got desperate. So I built a website. It was called agisehill.com, and it was named after a hill in Uganda that we used to climb up and just look across at the savannah. And I just put a manifesto, a rant, just basically threw everything out to the world. And I thought, somebody must read this and somebody must empathize with my situation and think, we've got to help this guy. But of course, nobody knew the website was there. Nobody knew who I was. Nobody knew what I was even really asking for. And so it achieved nothing, just like everything else I had tried up to that point had actually achieved nothing. So I knew what failure looked like. I was very good at failure for a long time.
Well, and I so appreciate that, right? And it's just a continual march on. And somewhere you find your way into studying social anthropology and just soar at it, which I want to contrast, your earlier years in studies where it wasn't a good experience for you. You weren't successful. And probably the approach was very different. And maybe you were studying something that you didn't care as much about. But I would say the difference from what at least you describe it in your book is night and day, right? You finished pretty much at the top of your class for the social anthropology course, or degree, I should say. So for our listeners, why anthropology?
So, anthropology was complete luck, and it turned out to be central to my career. Because I was interested in global development, and I decided when I left Jersey, which was the first time I sold up and left, I looked at universities where I could study social anthropology. And it turned out my great-great-grandfather was mayor of this town in England. So there's this whole crazy family history, which the book also touches on a bit. So I applied to Sussex, and you couldn't just do development studies. You had to do it with something. It was with French, with Spanish, with library studies, with knitting, with some other thing. But one of those things was social anthropology. And I thought, oh, that sounds interesting. I quite like the sound of that. I like people. So I took it. And it completely reshaped the way I thought about how you study people and problems and contexts and cultures and geographies, which was a really key part to my later work actually being successful. And again, that was a luck, chance thing that happened to me. So thank you, Sussex University, for forcing me at the beginning to take that subject.
I think it's brilliant. Again, what I also appreciate about how these things all come together in a story, right? As we can see how it all fits in the rearview mirror. It makes so much sense at that juncture, not while we're going through it. And then somewhere in there, you landed a job at Cable and Wireless. What was that and when?
So that was in '99. I graduated near top of the class, as you say. I needed money. I didn't know what to do after that, really. It's very hard to get professional jobs in the humanitarian sector. They're highly competitive. So I just saw a job for a cable and wireless. It was technology. I was good at technology. I thought it'd be fun to drive around in a van for a while. And so I became a team leader, which was funny because I'd never done this job before. And I was in charge of 20 other engineers. And it was great. I mean, I loved working with 20 dedicated, fun, engaged, talented people.
Mm-hmm. And this year again, that just I think that potpourri is the right word for you. So then we go on. You already talked about your volunteer experience in Zambia, but you also volunteered in Uganda. When was that, and what were you doing?
So I went to Uganda twice. I went 2 years after the Zambia trip for the first time, and that was to help build a hospital, and that was the same kind of trip as the Zambia trip had been. And then the second time to Uganda was in the middle of my degree, where I'd found this conservation project, which were looking for volunteers to do biodiversity surveys for 3 months out in the middle of nowhere in Uganda. And I quite like the idea of being out in the middle of nowhere. I've always had that. I've always liked the idea of disappearing. I've always liked the idea of living a very basic, simple existence without the complications of our lives. And so that was a very appealing trip. So that was the second time I went to Uganda.
Okay, and then we have to talk about your year stint in Nigeria working with the primates. That just sounds amazing. And your pictures and what you talk about in your book is so compelling. Oh, I'll never forget what you said is that, in terms of the primates, they are harvesting the mothers for their meat and then keeping the babies for pets. And that, I'll never forget what you said in your book. And that, a lot of those babies, they would have broken limbs from being pulled away, torn away from their mother. I can't imagine what you saw and witnessed in a year. How in the world did that trip come about?
Well, even though I get upset easily, and I know I'm very sensitive, I've never shied away from facing the things that upset me, because I think that's what drives you, right? I think quite often we need to be more angry about things, and we need to be more upset about things. When I came back from Finland, after failing there to achieve very much, I was sleeping on a couch, and it was actually 9/11 the day I found this vacancy. So I remember I spent a day on university campus using their computer. I found this random volunteer role in Nigeria to run this primate sanctuary. I came back and then I saw the news and everything that was happening with the Twin Towers. But I love primates. I'd seen primates at Jersey Zoo. I mean, who doesn't love primates? It was conservation. It was living in a developing country. It was doing something that felt like it was going to contribute in a meaningful way. And very few people wanted to go and live and work in Nigeria. I mean, it had a terrible reputation, and it still actually does. But most people were just too afraid to throw themselves at it. My mum thought I was mad. Most of my friends thought I was mad. Most people thought I'd come back in a box. I nearly did come back in a box, but I lasted a year, and I did. Yeah, I saw things I wouldn't ever want to see again. But you learn by being jarred, by being put out of your comfort zone, and by seeing things that really get to you. And I certainly had that.
Yeah, so I do know. So we've talked about two things, and I want to get the timing right. So your motorcycle accident in Nigeria completely transformed your life. It ushered in a whole different place. What I'm not sure about time-wise is if you created Frontline SMS before that or after that.
That was 2 years after that. So
okay.
The Nigerian bike crash put me on the path that led to that.
Okay, so you this is an interesting story. So you were on a motorcycle with somebody else driving, and then somebody else. There were three of you on the motorcycle. You go down, you break your leg big time, and you end up back home in Jersey 6 days later, something like that, right?
Yeah.
So what was it? Tell us about what was it about that experience that ushered in a new way forward for you?
I'd set out from Jersey 5 or 6 years earlier, and I spent all that time running around, selling everything, doing crazy stuff, and I ended up back where I started. But it wasn't just that. I was homeless, jobless, penniless, with a broken leg. So I'd gone backwards. And just out of the blue, somebody I used to work with at Jersey Zoo, and I wrote the computer systems for Gerald Durrell's Jersey Zoo. They didn't realize I'd even been away. They got hold of me. They phoned up where I was staying, and they said, "Oh, Ken, we need somebody who understands conservation, technology, and has worked in Africa. Are you interested in the job?" And I said, "Oh, that sounds perfect for me." So I hobbled on crutches to the UK for an interview, and I got a job doing everything I'd done over all those years, which seemed random and bitty and just scatterbrained, all suddenly came together in a phone call, which I wouldn't have been there to take if I hadn't broken my leg. That's another thing I just don't get like that's a career break, right? I mean, quite literally, that is a career break.
in all senses of the phrase, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so then where were you where I know you had to be somewhere, I think in Africa, when you had the idea to build Frontline SMS. So tell us the story of how that happened and what you were trying to help with.
So in 2003, when I went to Africa and started doing this work with this charity, which came as a result of the phone call, it was looking at how mobile technology could be useful in conservation and development work. And nobody was really doing it in any in-depth way. So it was an incredible time to be doing it. And we traveled a lot in rural areas. We went to Mozambique a few times. And we realized that mobile phones could be transformative for rural communities. But almost every piece of technology I found that was being built by people, mostly people that looked like me, by the way, not people in those countries, was aimed at large international NGOs that could pay lots of money. And it wasn't aimed at the people on the ground who actually lived and experienced and suffered from the problems. And that angered me. It really angered me, because I thought the best people to fix these problems are the people who are there, who experience it, and they're motivated to fix it. So I built a messaging platform that allowed you to do mass text messaging. And I built it in a way that meant it worked for the people who were suffering and experiencing the problems. And I just gave it to them. Said, here you go, off you go, do whatever you want to do with this. It's free, it's yours. And I'll help you if you need me. But if you don't need me, that's fine. And so it was influenced on a lot of the work that I did, and my frustration at kind of top-down, Western-dominated technology solutions.
And was it, at least if not in the very beginning, somewhere in there that your messaging system was used to monitor the presidential elections, correct?
That's right. Yes, in Nigeria, of all places.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's amazing. Really amazing. Well, so now, and we had to tell all that story before about how much you were literally feeling like you were reaching for something that would provide you meaning and purpose, and you're feeling that, you failed or your worst yet gone backwards, and then you land in this place where you develop something that has been used by hundreds of thousands of people or downloads in 190 countries. What in the world does that feel like?
Flattering, unbelievable. It exceeded all my expectations, but it spoke to me of the value of building things that work for people, because that's all I did. I built a very simple piece of technology that people could just understand and use. It wasn't rocket science. It was a dumb, boring, simple solution, but it was just needed. And the only reason I knew it was needed was because I bothered to spend the time living and working in the places where the problems were. And that was it. I mean, it was staggering. It took a while to get going. It took about 2.5 years. So it was a hobby. It was like stamp collecting. I was doing my day job, and I was going back and supporting Zimbabwean activists who were trying to overthrow Mugabe or get Mugabe to stop killing people, or busy being used in Pakistan, or being used in Afghanistan, or being used in other conflict hotspots. And it was incredibly. I was just proud that I built something that was helping people solve problems that I would never really be in a position to solve myself. It was empowering.
Did it feel at all like, gosh, all of this struggle was worth it? Did it register on that level, or how did it register?
It did actually start to feel like it was worth it. When it started to really, I started to get these people contacting me, and I started to realize that I was helping people who were doing incredibly valuable work, in many cases in very dangerous places, supporting them in a way that I never dreamt I'd be able to support them. And so I think, breaking my leg was a very unpleasant experience. Some of the other things I saw, in the primate sanctuaries, they were very unpleasant experiences, but I think they were prices worth paying to get the knowledge and the insight which I needed in order to build the thing that ended up changing my life and changing the lives of many other people. So, it's who I am, and I'm only the person I am because I put myself through the things I put myself through.
Mm-hmm. We're going to continue this conversation and get more into the space of social entrepreneurship. Let's grab our last break. I'm Alise Cortez, your host. We're on the air with Ken Banks. He is head of social purpose at Yoti. We've been talking a bit about some of the amazing potpourri of experiences that he's accumulated over his life, and then how they led him to where he was able to create Frontline SMS. After the break, we're going to hear more about what he's doing these days and his take on social entrepreneurship. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Dr. Alise Cortez is a management consultant specializing in meaning and purpose, an inspirational speaker and author. She helps companies visioneer for greater purpose among stakeholders and develop purpose-inspired leadership and meaning-infused cultures that elevate fulfillment, performance, and commitment within the workforce. To learn more or to invite Alise to speak to your organization, please visit her at alisecortez.com. Let's talk about how to get your employees working on purpose. This is Working on Purpose with Dr. Alise Cortez. To reach our program today or to open a conversation with Alise, send an email to Alise, A-L-I-S-E, at alisecortez.com. Now, back to Working on Purpose.
Thanks for staying with us and welcome back to Working on Purpose. I mentioned after the first break about the Grab Your Gusto Wellbeing webcast learning series. The content of this program is adapted from part one of my recently published book called Purpose Ignited: How Inspiring Leaders Ignite Passion and Elevate Cause, which is now available on Amazon. I wrote that book to awaken readers to their passion and purpose and help transform them into inspirational leaders who enliven the workplace and elevate the contribution of all business to the stakeholders. So if you're just joining us, my guest today is Ken Banks. He is the head of social purpose at Yoti. He's also a British award-winning social entrepreneur, mobile technology and global development expert with an undergraduate major in social anthropology with developmental studies. He is the best known for his developing Frontline SMS, a mobile messaging platform used by nonprofits in over 190 countries around the world. Joined today from Cambridge, England. I'm your host, Dr. Alise Cortez. So from here, I want to go back to your SMS platform. So you left that, I think, in 2012 to let others take it forward. So first, how did you realize it was time for you to step out and go do something else?
I think I had memories back to when I hated work, probably. And so,
oh, no.
Getting flashbacks to Jersey and standing outside the bank until 10 seconds to 9 and then going into work. I know what I'm good at. And I also know what I'm not good at. And I'm just very honest with myself. Life is too short to not be honest with yourself. And I was starting to do things I didn't enjoy. I was finding myself further and further removed from the users, further and further removed from the problems and challenges that technology could solve. And it was becoming about raising money, hiring staff, filling in anti-corruption policies for donors. It was the mechanics of running an organization. And I never signed up to do that. So I just thought, I've taken it as far as I can. I've had a good run. I had 5 very good years where I won almost everything I could imagine winning: fellowships, Nat Geo awards. I mean, it was incredible. I thought, well, I probably should quit while I'm ahead. So I quit while I was ahead.
Brilliant. Well, before we get into what you're doing today at Yoti, there would be, about 6 years between that time. So what did you do in those years?
I tried a few projects. I was very keen on local bartering, local exchange systems, local community empowerment. I wrote a couple of books. The Rise of the Reluctant Innovator was the first, which was about 10 people who had stories like mine, kind of fell into some big problem they never really expected and their lives ended up, devoting themselves to doing that. So that was my first book. That was quite a lot of work. I consulted, I traveled around a bit. I spent time on a ship with Archbishop Desmond Tutu, sailing the Pacific, talking to students, and he did the foreword, in fact, to The Rise of the Innovator. I did another book that Peter Gabriel, the famous musician, did a foreword for. I mean, this is all kind of weird stuff, even when just saying that now, it just sounds very weird. So I consulted, I earned money, I started a family. I settled down a bit and became a bit normal, I suppose.
Mm-hmm. Well, so what I like to think about it, Ken, is you've accumulated all these experiences in your life. And it was, even though your mother never got the chance to meet your children, I think it's beautiful that you also got that experience too, on top of everything else that you've done. And I'm thrilled about that. And I'm really captivated to understand you came to Yoti in 2018, and you today are head of social purpose. So what I find fascinating about that, you stopped engaging on your Kawanja site then. So I think we need to understand just what in the world does Yoti do and how has it so captivated you?
So Yoti is a digital identity company. They have a product and services that allow you to prove who you are online and in person. They can prove elements of your ID, your age, your address, your nationality, those kinds of things. So it solves a very big identity issue that exists on the internet. I was actually on their Guardian Council since 2016, so they invited me to sit on this external council where I help them with ethical challenges, with kind of moral issues and challenges as a business that they might face. And they were also keen to have people like me from outside of the sector to be able to give input and advice on what they were doing. And they're a B Corp. They have a very strong set of guiding principles. We have ethics committees. They have signed up to all sorts of pledges. So ethically, they felt, like a very good company who were trying very, very hard to do the right thing. And I saw so few private sector companies who were that committed. And so there probably weren't that many jobs I could have done, to be honest with you. And because I knew Yoti, the CEO heard I was looking for a proper job. Huanja was running, but I decided with a young family, it's time to get serious. I've got a mortgage. I need to bring them up. I want to go on holiday with them. I don't want to be scraping around. So I told them I was looking for work. The CEO asked me to sort of explain what I could do for them, and I did, and I joined in 2018. So it was, again, more a marriage of convenience in a sense. There was a spiritually, ethically sound company that spoke to my values that I wanted to work for, and they had a vacancy. Well, they made a vacancy.
Mm-hmm. And what does it mean, head of social purpose? I don't think I've ever seen such a title before, but I like it.
Yeah, no, I love the title. Well, it was head of social impact at the beginning, but I decided that impact was too focused on the end result. Impact is all about what's changed, and I felt social purpose was more about the process and the ethics and the feeling and the DNA of what we were trying to do. So it was changed halfway through to social purpose, and my job is to think about how we can use our human resources, use our technologies, use whatever we have to solve social and environmental problems on the planet. So it's to take what we have commercially and do socially beneficial things with it. It's kind of a dream job, really. And I get paid to do that now, which is, that wasn't always the case when I was starting out.
Yeah, well, absolutely. And you certainly are a beautiful sum total of everything that you've accumulated in terms of experiences, your values, your expression. And I'm really intrigued with your focus, your perspective on social entrepreneurship. You say in your book, The Resistant Innovator, I think it is, and you describe these people as driven, persistent, ambitious individuals working on innovative solutions to society's most pressing problems. And what I find fascinating about that is, of course, that's you, but you have a perspective about these individuals, and it seems from what I could tell of the book that you have spent some time mentoring these kinds of people to help them along their journey. Perfect application of all of your experiences.
Yeah, I mean, I've always felt, even before I'd actually achieved anything, I always wanted to help people. So, even writing computer programs for Freddie Cooper, which was helping children with learning difficulties, because the computer could do that and I was able to help. I wanted to do it. So I've always been drawn to be helpful. Sometimes I'm probably over helpful. So, when I meet people who are trying to solve problems, and when I feel I have something that might help them on their way, and perhaps ideally save them the pain and the anguish I had to go through in order to get to a point of success, it's a no-brainer for me to offer that time and that effort. And also, I feel I should pay back. I was lucky. I found my purpose. I found my meaning. I excelled. I succeeded. I did things beyond my wildest dreams. The world has been kind to me over the last 15 years. So I need to give back. It's payback time. And so I just feel a very deep sense of needing to do that.
I love that. And I think the world would be a such better place if more people had took that stance in that position. I completely agree with that. And then I want to go into something that you say in your book that I think is wildly important for our listeners. Anybody who's even gravitating to this notion of meaning and purpose and making a difference, especially through social entrepreneurship. But in your book, The Rise of the Reluctant Innovator, you talk about how all 10 of the people featured in this book took their chance. And that what makes their stories even more interesting is that in most cases, they weren't even looking for anything to solve.
Right.
The thing that ended up taking over their lives found them, as you say. And this speaks to what you and I talked about at the beginning of the show, why planning isn't necessarily everything. And that when we embrace serendipity and chance and luck in the pursuit of social change can actually take a hold of us. So you talk also about this notion of, being listening to what's happening out in the world and understanding it from the front line's vantage point, and then developing the skills to address that. So I think that's really important, because that's the, as you say in your book, and as I agree, the opposite approach that we tend to learn in school, where we get a bunch of skills and we go try to put them to work in the world.
Right.
So
Yeah.
speak to that really crazy idea you have about this backwards approach, if you will.
The people in the Rise of Reluctant Innovator, like myself, they'd got themselves out into the world. So you're not going to find a third world problem necessarily in Washington D.C. or New York, right? If you're drawn to that kind of work, you need to go to a third world or developing country. So I think the first lesson for me has always been, if you want to do something meaningful, you need to get yourself out into the places where the problems are. If you're into homelessness, or you're troubled about homelessness, or you cry when you see refugees fleeing areas and sleeping in the streets, and go and work with homeless people, spend time in homeless environments, right? Then that will give you some ideas, or at least it may give you an idea of how you might be able to contribute to a solution. But the key for me has always been, and I gave a talk in Munich about this, is about paying attention. And the title of that talk was Social Change Begins by Paying Attention. Because nothing happens if you don't pay attention. That's the very first step. And luckily, paying attention is not hard. Right? No one should really have an excuse to not pay attention. And I paid attention, and all the people in the Reluctant Innovator paid attention. And anybody who cares about the planet can take time to pay attention. And from there, you will find things that annoy you, trouble you, make you angry. And those are the things then that you need to focus on, because you need to find something that will make you get up every morning. This is a life journey, not a job. I think the word job is completely wrong when these things find you. It's a calling.
Agreed. The other thing that you talk about, which I completely agree with, is that you talk about going to go find out on the front lines what the problem is, involving the local people that it hurts, finding out from their perspective what they need, and then involving them in the solution, not just packaging up, here, I brought you a solution, I'm coming over from the United States, here it is. Yeah. That's just also really important to talk about.
Yeah, no, completely. And I always knew when I was traveling in these places that I had the luxury of being able to get on a plane home. However much you try and immerse yourself in these environments, you always have a choice that those people never have. They can't escape what they're experiencing. That is their life. And so for me, if you think about impact and you think about how can I possibly have the widest impact, how can my efforts be multiplied? The thing is, you need to build an army. Right, you need to inspire and motivate and drive as many people as you can to action, so that when you go, that work continues. I always felt that with Frontline SMS. I thought, if I stop tomorrow, will that product continue to have an impact? And the answer was yes. And I think that's a question we should maybe all ask ourselves. If I stop tomorrow, will the goodness continue? Will that positivity continue? And if it won't, then you're probably doing it the wrong way. But I think absolutely we need to motivate, inspire, help and support the people that are best placed to solve those problems. And that's not a white guy from the UK, not in the context of what I was seeing.
So we're getting close to being out of time here, but I want to get two more things out of you. First, since I'm so interested in helping people across the world come alive, like you have come alive. You literally have scratched and clawed for this meaning and purpose, and you did it. You found a way to make a difference in the world. So my question to you, Ken, is, do you think it's just a requirement? Do we have to go through the wildlife scratching to get there?
I don't think we do. Some people find their calling straight away, and I hate them for it. Well, not really. I don't hate them at all. But some people find their thing very quickly. I think if you're deeply committed to making change and creating change and doing good, what separates you from other people is that you continue looking and you don't give up. If you're fortunate enough to find it early, then great, because you don't waste time looking. I wasted years and years looking. But I think what separates the real committed individuals is that you do not just give up when you fail the first time. You get yourself up and you go again, and you get yourself up and you go again, and you never let go. And if at the end, you're lying in bed and you take your last breath and you think to yourself, I never found it, but damn, did I try? I don't ever want to say I didn't try. I don't want to ever say to my kids, I did not try to make the world better for you. Because that's the worst thing I think I could say to them.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And I would, knowing what I do about the role of purpose in life, purpose and works in part because we don't know when we're leaving. We don't know what the circumstances are. And so it gives us sort of an urgency to live each day, which seems to me that just how you've really governed your life. And the worst thing we could do is get to the end and say, oh, I wish I would have. Oh, gosh, I wish I would have gone after that. So much of what I'm doing is trying to motivate and encourage and inspire people to go for the very life and reach for what you've done, which is a big reason I wanted to have you on the show, was to showcase, look, here's a living, breathing example of what it looks like when you continue on, you persist, even when the going gets really tough and you feel like you failed, you just keep going. And your example, your story is so important in that way.
No, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. So here we are at the end already. You know, the show is listened to by people all over the world who really are out to create workplaces where people actually do want to come to work, where inspirational leaders lead them to their greatness, and we do business that betters the world. So with that, what would you like to leave our listeners and viewers with?
I think for most people, I think the key is to pay attention, immerse yourself in the places where the problems that trouble you are, and don't think you have to help 1 million people to do good. If we all help just one person, we would solve the problems of the world. So don't get obsessed with scale, just become obsessed with finding something that switches you on and throw everything you have at that.
I like that. In fact, you have a quote in, I think it's The Reluctant Innovator at the very beginning, about the importance of coming alive. What the world needs is for more people to come alive.
Absolutely.
And that's exactly why my next anthology of men that I'm curating, stories collecting from men across the world about how they've discovered their purpose, is called Alive from the Core. So completely agree with that, Ken. And I'm so happy to cross paths with you. You know that you can't escape from me now, right? You know, I'm on your trail, and you're in my zone. So I'm so happy to have you on, know you, and share you with our listeners and viewers. Thank you so much for being on.
Thank you very much.
Listeners and viewers, if you want to learn more about Ken Banks and the work he does at Yodi, you can go to yodi.com/social purpose. That's how you can find out about his current work today. You can still also access his personal site, which speaks to his journey prior to joining Yodi, by visiting the site kiwanja.net. I'm sure I'm saying that wrong, but let me spell it for you. It's kiwanja.net. And thanks again to our partnering sponsor, WorkProd, which helps companies build a platform where your workforce receives meaningful feedback. And thanks for the work from people they work with across the company. Last week, if you missed the live show, you can always catch a re-recorded podcast. We were on there with Tim Jones, aka the Grow Good Guy, talking about the work he does helping companies transition to B Corp status, like Ken was talking about. Next week, we'll be on the air with Dana Mendenhall, talking about her perspective on redefining no and transforming failure and rejection into unimaginable success and boundless opportunities. See you there. Remember that work's at least a third of our life, so let's work on purpose.
We hope you've enjoyed this week's program. Be sure to tune into Working on Purpose, featuring your host, Dr. Alise Cortez, each week on W4CY. Together, we'll create a world where business operates conscientiously, leadership inspires in passion performance, and employees are fulfilled in work that provides the meaning and purpose they crave. See you there. Let's work on purpose.